I have this thing called a general model that I think everybody should practice doing. I'm not a great believer in handing out or giving you every aspect of a general model. A general model is basically measurements that you decide would be a good measurement for a general sense of the adult human being. So you carry these measurements around, you like them, you refine them. They do not need to depend upon anything you get from an anatomy book. They will depend on your own sense of aesthetics. In years past and in other times, a general model was based on what the culture liked, and that would depend a great deal on the way that culture worked. And you can see iterations of that general model shifting from place to place. It was basically always somewhat controlled by the culture. But today, we don't have those kinds of restrictions. It's possible for you to independently create your own sense of aesthetics in your general model. A general model, by the way, means that it's not specific. So if you had a concept of a general model and you took it into a classroom situation, you could actually use it as a yardstick for measuring the specific case. So you have a model, and you look and you say, wow, her legs are longer than my general model. Her neck is longer. Her head is smaller. Notice when I do this description, no one actually matches the general model. So the general model becomes a yardstick of measurement for the specific case. And what it means is that you're coming to the table with something known. You will measure it against a certain set of standards from your general model. Why is that valuable? Because if you don't have a general model, you are always starting from scratch. All right, let's take this idea of a general model and go over some of the verbs. I'll give you some measurements, but it's really up to you to take it home and formulate your own. All right, this is a kind of an ongoing process. Don't expect to get it all at once. Allow yourself some slack on this. You're developing it. It took me a long time to come up with a model that I really liked. So I'm just going to start with a few ideas, and then you take it from there. So here we go. Let's see. Let's take a view. I'll do this fairly quickly. All right, and I'll do that again right here. Just to show, can be interesting. Right, okay, and let's say this is a back view. And that this is a front view. Notice how they're very much the same in the beginning. This is a front view. Okay, so in this case, the head is up here. In this case, we'll put the head here. Feet level down here. Here's the center. The rib cage is going to be in here. Rib cage will be in here. All right. Keeping it simple. All right. Here. Okay, in this case, we'll bring one arm down. Maybe we'll bring an arm up, because we can discuss that. In this case, we can also bring an arm up and keep an arm down. All right, so one's a front view. Now let's also do over here a profile. So I want to kind of make sure these are lined up, matching to some degree. I'm not going to be too anal about this, but we do want to refine this more and more as we go along. Like I said, I'm going to give you some fundamental, simple things to start. So notice it's approximately neck. Well, it's an approximation. All right. And one of the reasons I'm showing the three different views is so that you can see that a concept that might be really good from one angle may not be good from another angle. That doesn't mean that it's not useful. You shouldn't waste your time trying to think about something that works from every single angle. It's just not important. What's important is that you're able to use a simple geometric surrogate form that may also be bent and shaped and plasticized by your understanding of anatomy. So in this case, I can use a form something like that for the back when dealing with the rib cage. Here I'm using fairly similarly, and like I said, I can cut away here and put the neck in, low in front, high in the back, sternum, thoracic arch. I have a tendency to make that arch more like this, and then I do this big broad thing like this, which you see when you're looking at superheroes. Most rib cages are not Roman arches. They're more like Swiss roofs. So it's more like this with more pitch to it. That doesn't mean every rib cage is. Take your choice. I would like to keep it more human size in relationships than superhero size. On the other hand, maybe you need two different models. Maybe you need a superhero model, but that would be different than doing, say, an adult male or female. What we're really talking about is a formulation that is general and that can be stretched one way or the other. We'll talk about that. Now, a little narrower at the top like an egg, a little wider at the bottom. I have a tendency down here to go around the belt line, make this into a kind of teacup. And then I'm going to swing around that belt, and just on the inside here and here is where you'll find what is the iliac crest. It comes around like this. From behind. This is coming from behind forward. We would only be seeing this right about here. I'm not interested in that yet. I'm just simply showing you where it would be. If we drew the pelvis in here, it would be far narrower than this width we've got here. And I'm choosing this width because the belt does not tie here. It ties to some muscle groups that go this way. Therefore, this is a truer width than to do a pelvis there. So once I've done this and I've got the teacup, I'm going to cut away down like this, not to the bottom, but to leaving a little space, because what that represents is the pubic bone. And the ischium, if this is the pubic bone, the ischium splits and goes back like this from this point and goes back and becomes 2 points back here called the sits bones. So they're going back, and there are 2 points. All the back of the leg muscles attach to that point, and we'll get to that. So anyway, we're coming down, we find this. We found this. A measurement that's important for me is this one. It's very big. From this distance from here to here equals this distance from here to here. From the pubic bone, which might be about where the top of the trochanter is, by the way, on both of these, is about half the distance. Again, half the distance from there to the top of the head, right? That's really an important measurement. It's a great big measurement. You're not measuring with little tiny things, which can get you lost real fast in terms of measurement. You're measuring with great big things. Think of a contractor coming into your house or your apartment and saying, I need to measure your room. I don't have a tape measure with me. And they walk it off. And what they do is they walk it off in a general way to give you a general sense of what it might cost. So they make these strides. And they know that the stride that they're making represents a yard, 3 feet. So 1, 2, 3, you got 9 feet, and so on. They're measuring with big strokes, not little tiny ones. So I'm always thinking the same way. What are the biggest possible strokes here? If I wanted to, I could come in and say, well, there's 8 heads, 4 to this point, and down to the bottom of the knee, 6, and then down to the bottom, 8 in all. Some anatomy books will say, well, the human body is 7 3/4 heads high. Maybe so. But since everybody's absolutely different, I like 8 heads rather than 7 3/4. We're fractionating it way too much. So I'm going to try to generalize it. And that's basically how I've developed my model. And like I say, there's no right model or wrong model, so why not make the one that works best for you as a general model? Don't make it complicated. I've got 4 heads to this point. Here's another thing. Once I reach this, this distance along the sternum equals from there to the navel. That distance equals from there to the pubic bone. There's 4 points and 3 spaces. 1, 2, 3, right? Is that exactly right? Maybe, maybe not. It will shift. But remember, you're using it as a general yardstick by which you measure the specific case. So I'm doing these things because it's easy for me. If I come out here and find the humerus, I find that it swings right along either here or somewhere in that area at the bottom of the rib cage. That includes the floaters in the back. When I come down here, by the way, I brought the trochanter out, and the top of it kind of lines up with the pubic bone. Does it? Well, more or less. And it fits in up here like this. The trochanter is this way and comes down. I'm going to get the wrist hooking right around that, you see? So that kind of works for me to get that way. Now, the interesting thing is that this distance equals from there to the first knuckle. So the forearm is actually shorter than the upper arm. And once you do these things, you may be surprised at the true length of things. For instance, this is a lot longer than this distance. This distance, if we add this, equals the lower leg all the way to the ground. Now, that doesn't mean that somebody's legs might not be longer in either one of these areas. It's not the same for everybody. Somebody could be longer here or longer here. Generally speaking, it's here, but sometimes it's also here, and sometimes there's more distance here. If, for instance, I bring that iliac crest up and that's there, I'm measuring this at about 3 inches, but not from here to here. There is a tendency for people to make too great a distance here as a stylization. I would be cautious about that. And it does vary, again, from person to person. Some people's rib cages can be very close to the iliac crest. Okay, now we said that the clavicle comes out, and I'm just going to give it as a direction, at rest, and the trapezius coming off the back of the neck. I'll draw it here. It comes to about where this articulates with the acromion process. What's the acromion process? Well, I'll again draw the spine of the scapula. It's coming up this way, right, like this, turning. And here, this represents the upper arm and the shoulder muscle, the deltoid, which is coming off from the scapula. The scapula is already swinging up in this direction, right? And it's out. And the trapezius attaches to the occipital ridge back here, about where the center of the ear is, and pulls down and attaches over here like this. It'll be slightly rounded because it's helping to lift the arm. So there's that part of it. Pulling up, and maybe this comes over. Again, here is our ovoid form, right? And this is slightly ovoid as well. We're back into this. We've got the spine here. Remember, this is C7. This is T1, right? There's 12 of these, and they do this. Now you have this area where the lumbar spine is into the sacrum right here. Notice that I can't treat this area the same way as I treated this area. This one, you very definitely need to be aware of the iliac crest. So that becomes part of it. Okay? And this is often referred to as a kind of a butterfly shape. So let's just draw that for a moment. Right? This is the gluteus medius. This is the gluteus maximus. So on this side, gluteus medius, pulling in, gluteus maximus down here. Okay. Right? Sacrum, it tucks into the coccyx. We don't see it. Right? Okay. So I'm using that configuration. That's one of the best ones I can come up with. By the way, the scapula on this one is parallel, lines up with the spine. And by the way, this is a flat thing. The scapulas are like this. But remember that the upper body, the pelvis, turns away. So the scapulas are not facing us broadside like my two hands. Instead, they're doing this. So guess what happens to the scapulas when we turn the body like this? Do you see that? You're actually seeing this one more broadside, and you're seeing this one more on the edge. So if you're looking at the back and you can't find the scapulas, it might be because you're thinking you should be seeing this, when actually you're seeing this. Therefore, the scapula over on this side might be more like this. So when the trapezius comes off, and we see the muscles pulling this way in the shoulder, maybe the arm is back a little bit, see? Right. So we're seeing it on edge. We're not seeing this flat like that so much. Right. Okay? So coming back down here, I think I want to deal with the pelvis on both sides of these now, right? Over here, I said that this is wider than the iliac crest. And that's because we have a muscle that pulls down this way, like this. And a muscle obviously pulls this way. That muscle, by the way, is called the tensor fascia latae. And that, in addition to another one right here, give this a broader feeling than what the iliac crest would have us think. And so this makes sense because it gives us a truer idea about what that profile might be. And on this side, it's the same. We're seeing the gluteus medius, maybe because we might see a little bit of the maximus, possibly around there on this one. Why? Because our subject is facing this direction. Okay, so notice it's all wider in this area. And that might be true here too, because we see this doing this, and this doing this. Yeah. So what's all this? Well, there's a kind of an indentation here, but what we see in this area right here is the tensor fascia latae, right? We might not see much of it on this side, but that's a whole lot more than just seeing, for instance, the butterfly. So it's even a little wider than the butterfly would have you take